for all the research scholars, because just thinking in a research is not much sufficient for a scholar, and researcher must have ability to effectively analyze information and then form a judgment. So we all must be aware about our biases and assumptions. Critical thinking also helps us to enhance our work quality. So I guess this topic helps us a lot to be a good and effective scholar who can serve the society by their thinking process. So welcome you, sir, in this evening lecture series. And now I would like to call Vikas sir for sir. Welcome, speech.
Okay.
Over to you, Vikas sir.
Okay. So, thank you so much, Sakshi Singh ji. First of all, I would like to welcome on the core of my heart to Dr. Amir Mohammad Nasrullah sir. Sir has accepted our invitation and sir has ensured to I will deliver my lecture in to your associations, and sir has also taken the very significant topic for his lecture. So when I was read the CV of the Dr. Amir sir, so sir has sir has written many research paper, many articles on the regarding of the critical thinkings. Like sir has written 4 decades of the industry's policies in Bangladesh, a critical analysis, a correction to COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on our physical environment, a critical analysis, and critical analysis of micro enterprises policy development in developing countries, a case study of the Bangladesh. So sir has written many research paper on the regarding of the critical analysis. So I would like to welcome to Dr. Amir sir, and I would like to welcome also to all the members of the Indian Research Scholars Association who has taken the good initiative to organize the such kind of the lecture series in contemporary issues and research methodology. I would like to welcome to the convener of this lecture series, Naina Prasad ji, and co-convenor of this lecture series, Sakshi Singh ji, and Sakshi has also moderated the good sessions always. So, and I would like to welcome the Dhiresh Kumar ji and the all participants who have joined different universities and different colleges. Like I can see on the screen, Dr. Suresh Sardangi has associate professors has joined from the Sambalpur University. Professor Dr. B.D. Jani ji, Jyoti Singh ji, and also I would welcome to on the depth of my heart to Ahmed Safik sir. Sir is I think sir is
all the way from Canada.
From Canada.
Yes.
So it's great
Yes.
for us that sir has joined.
Very senior professor.
So,
a very senior professor and distinguished.
Yes,
yeah,
sir, yes, sir.
expert in public administration and political science.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so I would like to everyone, and I would like to all participants, all executive committee members of the Indian Research Scholars Associations. So without taking any time, I invite to Sakshi Singh for the further proceeding.
And before starting this lecture, let me introduce our speaker, sir. And as I already told, and Vikas also told, that sir is from University of Chittagong, Bangladesh, and sir is a PhD in management studies, and area of interest is research and teaching includes governance and public administration, public policy, rural development, local government, environmental management, and entrepreneurship development. Sir has published 5 books and many scholarly research articles and book chapters also. And sir also work as a co-researcher in a collaboration of independent universities. And sir is currently uh, head of the CFSRD Global Center for Local Government. Sir, we all welcome you and we are eagerly waiting for your lecture. Sir, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sakshi Singh, for a nice introduction. I'm actually not that much scholar. Thank you very much for inviting me to have this lecture with All India Indian Research Scholars Association. I'm still learning, and I have intention to learn from you today as well. Though I'll be lecturing first, and after the session, we may have some interactions to have some interactions regarding the whole lecture. So I don't know how far I will be able to make justice for you. Okay, let's start. Just give me 1 minute. I'm opening my slides. Mhm.
Sir, mute.
Just yeah, I'm not getting my screen here. Windows or entire screen. Hmm. What is happening? Mhm. Mm. Vikas, do you see my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Your
Do you
screen
see,
is visible, sir.
but do you see the presentations slides?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Just okay. Okay. Thank you very much again, Vikas, and I'm sorry for the interruption. I'll be speaking today on critical thinking in social science and humanities. Okay. So first of all, I welcome all the scholars, and I'm very happy to see all the Indian scholars here, and very, good to say that you have this sort of association in India, but in Bangladesh, I didn't find any association of the scholars herein. Okay, so it is my privilege to say a few words on critical thinking in social science and humanities research. Okay, in this lecture, basically, I want to focus on, first of all, critical thinking as a concept, and then I will try to have a look into the importance of social and humanities research, and then who is basically a critical thinker, and then I will move to skills necessary to become a critical thinker. And then what I will do, I will try to have a discussion on the steps to develop critical thinking skills and mindset. Okay. And later on, I will try to have some common pitfalls or problems that the researcher in their early stage face to thinking critically. And finally, I will try to have some, ways to reduce all those pitfalls or importance of being aware of these pitfalls and concluding remarks. Okay. Now, let us have a look on this slide. Here, I am not going to define critical thinking elaborately, but I have some clue to give you regarding critical thinking. It is basically a very fundamental skill in all academic research, whether it is in social science or humanities or even business or law or even science. It is involving analyzing, evaluating, interpreting all the informations in a very systematic and logical manner. Okay, so it is called that it is a process of objectively evaluating evidences, arguments, and ideas to arrive at well-reasoned conclusions. Moreover, we can say that critical thinking in social research or humanities research involves questioning, okay, assumptions, examination of evidences, facts, and also identification of biases and fallacies, and even drawing logical conclusions based on all the evidences available. So in this stage of, in the stage of research, even whether it is PhD or MPhil or even any research, we need to know how to make questions, how to create assumptions, how to examine the evidences, okay, how to identify the biases and fallacies in, in fact, okay, and in creating logical conclusions. Okay, so we can say critical thinking is the ensemble of reasoning mechanisms that enables us to synthesize, analyze, process, and evaluate information. Yeah, just in one sentence, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy said, it is a careful, goal-directed thinking. So always you have to think of our goal in our research. And based on that goal, we have to think very critically. Otherwise, it will not be possible for us to draw a logical conclusion. Now, we can say it is very essential in any type of research, as we said earlier, because it is helping us to develop research questions. I said earlier, questioning is one of the part of critical thinking, but we need to know how to develop research question. So if you have critical thinking knowledge, it will help you to develop research questions, and also to help you design research studies, collecting and data analysis, and also interpretation of your research finding, because it allows the researchers to evaluate the quality and validity of research. Okay, it also helps you to identify gaps in the literature and makes evidence-based decision. Okay, well, another important point in critical thinking is that it is also focusing on being open to alternative viewpoints, right? What I'm thinking, you may not be thinking in that way. Okay, so being willing to revise one's own conclusion, right? We have to based on new evidences. However, it requires intellectual humility and a willingness to challenge one's own assumptions and biases. That is all about critical thinking. You may have different, quotations on critical thinking in the literature. However, now the question is why it is necessary in social and humanities research. Before that, let us have a look on what is social research and what is humanities research. Is there a difference between these two? We see humanities research is a very systematic and critical investigation of human culture, values, beliefs, and practices, including the study of literature, philosophy, history, languages, art, religion, and other aspects of human experience. So we can say humanity is basically dealing with the philosophical question of what makes us human. On the other hand, social science use a more scientific approach, essentially applying similar methodology as the natural sciences to the study of humans in the society. So in this context, we may summarize humanities and social science can be very vastly different, but all have one thing in common in both these disciplines. They are focused on human life. Okay? While humanities subjects are mostly analytical or philosophical, social science subjects are more scientific and experimental. However, we have some common thing both in social and humanities research, that is, we are both focusing on human life. However, why is critical thinking important in social and humanities research? I collected some important points regarding the importance of critical thinking. We know that actually all the researchers have some sort of anxiety, right? And this takes an increasingly dominant role in all academic research. We have a pressure to publish or perish that can wrap our focus into critical thinking. That is, only good research is publishable. So we have to be very critical in thinking so that we can have some logical conclusions regarding our research. So in this case, in this context, we can say critical thinking is important in any academic research. Focus some points here. It is helping us to have some sort of consistency and accuracy. Okay. Secondly, it is helping us to evaluate the evidences existing. Okay. Then identification of bias and assumptions. It is helping us to solve problems, and also development of new ideas and communication of our research finding to others. These are some of the important points as to why critical thinking is very important. Okay, Vikas, am I audible to each and everybody clearly?
Yes, sir. Your voice is clear, sir.
Okay, and the slides are okay?
Yes, sir. Visible, sir. Visible.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now let us have a briefly look on the importance of critical thinking in social or humanities research. As we said earlier, it is helping us to have consistency and accuracy, right? Actually, it helps all the researchers, whether they are in social science or humanities or even business, to approach their work with rigor and accuracy, ensuring that the research methods and findings are reliable and valid. Secondly, it is helping us to evaluate evidences. How? It is basically evaluating the evidences they encounter and determine its relevance and reliability to the research questions and hypotheses. Okay. Thirdly, critical thinking helps to identify their own bias and assumptions and those of others, which can influence the research process and findings. Well, we will be trying to, collect some data, right? We may be biased. Our assumptions may be biased, right? Because in one particular question may have different answers. So if you have critical thinking skill, you'll be able to identify the biases and you'll be able to take the good or good data, okay? Then it is helping all the researchers to identify and solve problems that may arise during the research process, such as inconsistencies in data or unexpected results. Okay. It's also helping us to develop new ideas as you are thinking critically. So automatically new ideas, new theories based on the analysis will be created. And finally, it is helping us to communicate our findings or ideas in a very clear and logical manner. It is making it easier for others to understand and build their work. So we can say it is essential for conducting rigorous and impactful research that can advance our understanding of the world around us. So, finally, we can say critical thinking helps to approach the research with a very critical and objective perspective, evaluating evidences and developing insights that can contribute to the advancement of knowledge or creation of knowledge in your field. Now, based on this, let us have a look on who basically is a critical thinker, right? Who are they? What skills do they have? So in answering this question, we can say people who apply critical thinking are consistently said to have a critical thinking mindset, but no one is born this way. So critical thinking mindset is very important. These are attributes that are learned and improved through practice and implication. Okay, so these are attainable based on training. However, in the academic context, it is most commonly associated with your own arguments. Okay, so we might be asked to think critically about other people's argument or create our own. Now, critical thinkers basically those people who can ask questions. So asking questions is very important skill for the critical thinkers. Number two, they collect relevant information. Why relevant? Because you have to collect true data, relevant data on your particular topic. So we have how to, justify or how to collect relevant information. So critical thinkers know how to gather relevant information. Thirdly, they can think through solutions, and also they can reach towards conclusion. Okay, we said earlier problem solving. However, they can also consider alternative systems of thought, and finally they can communicate effectively. So these are some of the important critical characteristics of a critical thinker. Moreover, they are willing to admit when they are wrong or when they do not know the answer, rather than digging into a gut reaction or emotional point of view. That is very important, skill or characteristics or features of a critical thinker. Okay? Now, these are some of the important skills based on the characteristic feature of a critical thinker, right? But it is said that there is no hard and fast rule or standard list of skills of a critical thinker. Okay? But these are some of the important skills that are necessary for a critical thinker. Okay? First of all, interpretation, then analysis, then inference, explanation, evaluation, and self-regulation. So these are 6 important critical thinking skill of a researcher. So we have to remember, as long as we are researching, we have to have these sort of skills among us. Otherwise, it is not possible to draw logical conclusion regarding our thesis or regarding our research. Again, there is no standard list of skills. So, but I'm thinking these are very important for a critical thinker. First of all, let us briefly discuss about what is interpretation. Interpretation skill basically help us recognizing a problem and describing it without bias. And it is helping us to distinguish the main idea from the text, constructing a tentative categorization or organization structure, and finally, clarifying the meaning of a sign or a chart or a graph. So interpretation skill will help you to recognize your problem or to recognize your problem statement of the thesis and help you to have main ideas from the text. Okay. Then analysis. It is another important skills of a critical thinker. It means identification of similarities, differences between the two approaches to a solution. So while we'll have a question, have a problem, we have to have different alternative solutions. So analysis will help you to identify the similarities and differences between those alternatives. It also helps you isolating the main claim made in an editorial or a statement and tracking it back to the supporting reasons for the of the position someone is advocating. It also helps you predicting what will happen next in a given situation, and also developing a workable plan to gather information to resolve an uncertainty. Then explanation, it is also a good and organize the findings. Also helps us stating research result and describing the required methods or criteria, and citing the evidences that led you to accept or reject another person's positions on a particular issue. Then evaluation, it means judgment, giving judgment. It is helping you to judge an author or speaker's credibility. Determination whether the evidence at hand supports the conclusion being drawn, and recognizing whether an argument's conclusion follows with certainty or confidence from its premises. And finally, self-regulation. Okay, it is basically checking for understanding of uh, a research without injecting our own views or ideas, and also reminding ourselves to separate personal opinion and assumptions from those of the authors of a text. However, these are some of the important critical thinking skills uh, of a researcher. Now, we'll have a discussion on the step-to-step process of critical thinking, mindset, and skill. This is basically uh, some steps. There are 6 steps in critical thinking. I mean, to develop critical thinking skill, we have to follow this process. Again, this is not the standard or hard and fast rule. We may discuss this process in different way. So I'm discussing the whole process of critical thinking in this way. First step is clarification, or clarify thinking purpose and the context. And then questioning the sources of information. Then identification of the arguments. That is called identify step. Then analyze the sources and arguments. Then evaluate the arguments of others. And finally, create or synthesize own arguments. So this is the whole process of critical thinking as I'm thinking. Let us have a look briefly, and then I will go to in detail. What is the clarification of thinking purpose and context? We know that we live in a world oversaturated with information of varying quality and relevance. So, to be an effective critical thinker, we need to focus on our own purpose and context. This is very, very important, so that we can avoid information overload and keep track of our own line of thinking. So we'll later on discuss about how to think, how to clarify thinking the purpose in detail. Secondly, question sources. We know that not all the sources of information are equally credible, accurate, or relevant. So questioning our sources will sharpen our thinking and will help us select the most appropriate information and prepare the ground for further analysis and evaluation. Thirdly, identify arguments. This is the third step to critical thinking. Arguments can be found everywhere. But whenever somebody is trying to show that something is true or persuade somebody else to agree with them, we can identify an argument. So as a researcher, we may find that the ability to identify arguments is one of the most important and useful critical thinking skill. Then, fourth stage of this critical thinking development process is analyze sources and arguments. Once you identify arguments, then you have to analyze the sources and those arguments. You see, to analyze something means to examine it in detail, explain, interpret. So for the purpose of critical thinking, we need to be able to examine sources, arguments, theories, and processes, and explain how they work. So we know that good analysis always involves examination, interpretation, explanation of the interaction of evidences, reasoning, assumptions, methodologies, claims, and arguments. So we have to have good analysis. Then fifthly, evaluation of the arguments of others. Evaluation should consider and explain the relative strengths and weakness of our sources and the arguments they present. So we need to be able to evaluate arguments, the claims that support those arguments, the evidence that supports those claims, and the reasoning that connects all of them. And finally, based on the evaluation of other arguments and my arguments as a researcher, we have to create our own arguments. That is the final step of developing critical thinking skills. That is, creation of arguments consisting of bringing together evidences, reasoning, and claims, and developing own main claim. That is the final stage. So creating arguments is also called synthesis. That means placing things together. Remember, when we create arguments, we bring together insights from our analysis and evaluation. And we also consider how critical thinking might apply in the broader context and what new insights and perspectives it brings to us. Okay, so these are the brief, discussion of all the 6 stages to the development of critical thinking skills and mindset. Now I will try to discuss elaborately all these steps. Okay, first of all, clarification of the purpose and context. So when we will be thinking critically about something, clarify by asking some fundamental questions, right? Now the question is, what are those? First of all, what is the problem or topic? First of all, we need to understand that. If you don't understand your purpose or your problem or your topic, you will be lost. So this is the first fundamental question or foundational question you have to think of. Secondly, what question or goal am I addressing? Okay, thirdly, what different viewpoints, arguments, concepts, or parts will I need to consider when thinking through these problems or topic? And fourthly, do I have sufficient understanding of the information or parts relevant to this problem or topic? So if you have these 4 questions in your mind, you will be able to clarify your purpose, your context of the research. Okay, and these initial questions are often associated with the identification of stage of critical thinking. However, in this stage, we can do some initial lower order thinking in order to build a foundational understanding of the problem and then the elements it is composed of. So as we progress through the thinking process, we'll question and interrogate our own sources and move to more higher order stages of critical thinking questions, such as analysis, evaluations, and synthesis. Okay? Now, how can we define the critical thinking purpose? There are some questions that may help us to think clearly the purpose and focus. What is the question, issue, or problem, and how would we define it? So we should have our own definition of problem. Do we have a question or aim to guide our thinking? So you have to think of the definition of your purpose as well. Next is understanding the context. That is also very important. It is very difficult to critically analyze a problem or a topic if we do not understand the relevant ideas and context. So if we are having trouble to understanding the basic facts or arguments, we could consider doing some further background reading or visualizing the ideas through brainstorming or mind mapping to better recognize the structure and connections. Now, identify different perspectives and parts. It is also important part of the identification stage to the development of critical thinking. You see, most problems or topics consist of different parts and may be subject to continuous or contradictory arguments. So before we critically analyzing these different viewpoints, we need to first recognize all those parts and make sure we understand them. So you have to start by listing all the relevant arguments that already exist for our topic or question, or all of the different parts of our problem. And once we have identified the relevant arguments, we can also list different reasons
given to support or rebut the arguments. Then locate the evidences. This is also very important part of this stage, the first stage. After you have understood the different perspective or parts that are relevant to our thinking problem, then we have to identify the relevant evidence we'll need to consider. For example, is the evidence available to support the arguments or ideas we have identified so far? So you have to have this question in your mind. So the evidence should be information from existing sources. For example, academic articles containing arguments from different perspectives on the topic. And the evidence could also be information gathered from our own observation, experience, and or practice. However, if relevant, we may also need to identify research or creative method we will use to gather or produce some evidences. So this is all about the first stage of clarification. Okay. Secondly, once you clarify your purpose, your sources, then you have to have understanding about making questions, right, regarding the sources. This is a second stage to develop critical thinking skill. Okay, questioning sources is a key component of critical thinking because not all the sources of information are equally credible, we said earlier, accurate or relevant. So questioning and examining sources will help us to eliminate irrelevant or erroneous sources. Okay, it will help us select sources that are relevant and reliable, sharpen the focus of our critical inquiry, get a better understanding of relevant current knowledge and debates, and prepare the ground for analysis and evaluation of the sources. So that's why questioning sources is very important stage in the development of critical thinking skill. Okay, it is especially important when we are using web search algorithms that do not distinguish between what is reliable, unreliable, or fake. However, we're encouraged to use academic sources that have been reviewed by experts before they have been published. And this ensures a rigor to the claims made in published academic sources. However, here in this step, some questions are there that help us to decide which sources are reliable and relevant. So there are 4 important points: purpose, accuracy, relevance, and credibility. So regarding purpose, actually for what purpose were the sources produced? Okay, you know that all the sources are produced for a purpose, right? Some aim to record, inform or persuade, others to entertain, excite, mislead, or confuse. So identifying the source's purpose can help decide whether the source is useful or not. Okay, so there may be some questions that can help us to identify the purpose. For example, does the source mention its intended audience? Then you have to think of, does the source support the views of specific ideology, person, company, or organization? Does the source aim to elicit a strong emotional response? Does the source use technical language and complex descriptions of events that appear to be aimed at experts rather than a general audience? And does the source use humor or entertaining language rather than academic language? So if you have these questions in your mind and answers ready, then you will be able to identify the purpose of the sources you are collecting. Then accuracy, this is second important part in this stage. How accurate is the source? Okay, so in this case, we may ask some questions. Can the evidence and statements made in the source be verified against other reliable source? Does the source make statements or observations that present only one side of the issue? And is the source missing crucial evidence or information? So if you have, again, these questions in your mind, it will help us to decide whether our sources are accurate accurate or not. Thirdly, relevance. How relevant is the source? To decide our sources whether they are relevant, we may ask these questions. Is the source recent enough to reflect current debates and arguments? Very important. Have recent developments made some evidence or methods contained in the source outdated? Okay, so especially in STEM means science, technology, engineering, maths, and medicine. This knowledge is changing quickly due to technological and research developments. So it is very important to use the most recent sources. That's why especially in science and technological research, even in social science research, we are focusing on, current or updated informations so that they are relevant to the context. However, in other disciplines like philosophy or history, sources can be relevant even they were originally published decades or centuries earlier. So relevance is third important, issue to be considered in this stage. In such disciplines, especially in where we are distinguishing between current arguments and methods, historical arguments, evidence, and methods, we have some questions. Does the source assist in answering our question? Does the source add to our understanding of the topic? Is the context of the source relevant to our question? Are the definitions, methods, and interpretations appropriate for our discipline? So if you have these questions in your mind and you have the answers, you will be able to find the relevance of your sources. And finally, credibility. This is also very important. Credibility of the authors, okay, their qualifications, their affiliations. To be reliable, the author of source should have the appropriate knowledge and authority to speak about an issue. It means the author has the expertise in the relevant field of knowledge, including appropriate qualifications and affiliations. Okay, and qualifications, you see, is relevant to the subject that can help in identifying whether the author is an expert in the field, an amateur enthusiast, or someone with no prior education and specialized knowledge on the subject. However, if the author is an expert, aware of the current developments and appropriate methods, it is likely that the information will be of high standard. But on the other hand, if the author is someone with basic knowledge of the subject, the information may contain a mixture of plausible but also flawed content and methods, and therefore may be less reliable. So we have to think of the credibility of the author's qualification, right? Whose sources we are going to analyze or evaluate or examine later on. Okay. However, so this is all about questioning. Now let's have a look on the third stage to the audience. Are you all okay with me?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. If you face any problem, please let me know. Okay. Now, the third step to develop critical thinking skills and mindset, that is identify. What to identify? Identify the arguments. Okay. The being able to identify arguments is an important part of critical thinking. It allows us to understand how people structure their thinking and prepares the ground for analysis and evaluation so that you can formulate an argument of our own. Okay, so we have to identify others' argument here as well. Now the question is, what is actually argument mean? An argument is any sort of statement or claim supported by reasons. Okay, so without reason, you cannot claim anything. You cannot state anything. Okay, so arguments range from quite simple to very complex. For example, an argument for changing the law or introducing a new scientific theory. And this can be found everywhere. Whenever somebody is trying to show that something is true, present a point of view, or persuade someone else to agree with them, and we can identify an argument. For example, news outlets, social media, and academic sources are full of arguments that complete for attention influence. So to succeed in a research, as a researcher, we need to identify academic arguments made by the scholars. Okay? An academic argument follows the conventions of the relevant discipline and can also be called apposition, main point, contention, or central claim. Okay, so this is all about an argument. You can understand that. Now the question is, what is an argument made of? I have some example here. A simple argument presents a claim, right? For example, you should bring an umbrella. This is a statement, argument. And this is supported by reasons because it is likely it will rain. So here, the reason is it is likely it will rain, and claim you should bring an umbrella. Okay? So strong arguments are supported by reasons that draw on relevant and reliable evidence. So in this example, you see another example. The evidence is a radar map on the website of the Bureau of Meteorology that shows an approaching storm front. However, if you talk about an academic argument, they are more formal and thorough than arguments used in everyday conversations or in media. Okay? These academic arguments are presented in formal language, okay, including the best up-to-date evidence and use explicit reasoning to support their claims. Remember, this is academic argument. Okay? People who are academically or scholarly, they will be actually reading these arguments. So these are usually also more complex than everyday arguments. And they consider relevant claims and counterclaims as well as broad area of reasons supported by evidence. So without evidence, without reason, you cannot make any argument. However, this often means that they include responses to other academics' arguments and counter arguments that each with their own set of reasons and supporting evidence. However, evidence in academic arguments can be quite extensive and usually draws on research and a range of reliable and relevant sources. Now, the question is, what is the best strategy to identify argument? Okay? Have a look. First of all, find an argument summary. Authors often summarize their arguments to help their readers, especially as some arguments can take the form of long articles or books with several hundred pages. So in academic sources, argument summarizes can be found in the abstract, okay, as well as in the introduction and conclusion or discussion. So you don't need to go the whole pages of the book, whole pages of the papers. If you go to the abstract, conclusion or introduction or even some sort of discussion, you may find the arguments. Okay, so the argument summary is expressed at the main point, conclusion, or take-home message for the reader. You see, in non-academic sources, look for the summary at the beginning or the conclusion, especially the reports, right? Where often include executive summaries that provide an overview of the main points or arguments. And when you will read out these summaries, okay, these abstracts or conclusions, you will find some expressions that will indicate an argument summary. Sometimes they are saying, I argue that, or we argue that, our position is that, in conclusion, or we can conclude. These are some of the important, starting point of the sentences regarding the argument summary. Okay? So in this way, we can find an argument summary. Now, let us have a look on the fourth stage. Okay, that is analysis or analyze the sources and arguments. So we have discussed about the sources, arguments, okay, and clarifications of the sources. However, now analysis. To analyze something means to examine it in detail, explain and interpret. Okay, so analyzing sources means examining their components like arguments, claims, reasons, methods, and evidences, and also explaining how they work together to make a point or an argument. So in this context of critical thinking, analysis is key preliminary step before evaluation. And we know that evaluation in this process is the fifth step or fifth stage. So before evaluation, we have to have an analysis. However, good analysis ensure that our evaluation is founded on evidence and understanding rather than on first impression or superficial reasoning. However, mastering analysis will help us better understand how the authors of our sources approach problems, use evidences, and formulate arguments. Okay? It will also help us to identify trends, patterns, and gaps in our sources or even in current research. Okay, now, how do I get started with analysis? This is very important. Okay? Once we say analysis, this is not the end. We need to know how to start with the analysis. However, to perform analysis, we need to interrogate a source, a theory, or a process from different perspectives until we can explain how their parts work together and how one source, theory, or process is connected to others in a broader context. So first of all, this is the first thing, right, in the steps to analysis. However, alternatively, if we are analyzing academic article, we'll need to understand how the authors justify, develop their own arguments, and how they structure the evidence and reason to make their point. Okay? However, to improve our analysis, we have to consider creating an outline, our own outline, summary, or the notes, because it will help us to develop our own perspective on how the parts fit into the bigger picture and to maintain our own clarity of thinking. Okay? Now, how do we analyze sources, arguments, methodologies, and evidences? These are all important part of our own critical thinking. Source, arguments, methodologies, and evidences. First of all, analyzing sources, right? When analyzing a source, we have to interrogate some questions, right? First of all, its purpose and assumptions, okay? Its structure, its use of evidence and reasoning, limitations and biases, and any patterns or themes that we uncover. So if we have interrogation on these things, it can help building our own preliminary questions. Okay, so when we analyze multiple sources, we can compare and contrast our analysis of individual sources by using an analytical matrix or a mind map. Okay, secondly, purpose and assumptions. If you want to analyze our own sources, right, regarding purpose and assumptions, there may be some questions. And so you have to have these questions in your mind, as well as you have to have ready answers. What is the rationale for producing the source? What need, problem, issue, or research gap does it address? When was the source produced? What is the aim of the source? And is it expressed explicitly? Or is the aim implicit? What pre-existing knowledge, attitude, or worldview does the source assume? So if you have these questions, right, it will help us to start our analyzing sources, especially the purpose and assumptions. So I have given some ideas about structure, evidence and reasoning, limitations and patterns and themes. Regarding structure, we have to ask questions like, how is the source structured, organized? Does this source follow a recognizable structure? How does the structure of source guide the reader and facilitate the understanding? Okay. Secondly, evidence and reasoning. What types of evidence does the source use? What is the evidence gathered, processed, and communicated? And how does the source use reasoning to make its point? Regarding limitations and bias, what are the limitations of the source? Is there any evidence of bias? Is there evidence of a conflict of interest? And is there anything of relevance that appears to be excluded? And regarding patterns and themes, do some of the sources follow similar patterns or themes? Okay. Can we use the patterns and themes identified in our own sources to refine our analysis or clarify our own thinking? So we have to have these questions in our mind regarding structure of the papers, sources, evidence and reasoning, limitations, biases, patterns and themes. Okay, and then it will help us to analyze very critically. Then analyzing arguments. When analyzing arguments, we have to start with closely examining them, identifying their claims, reason, and supporting evidences. Okay, this is important because when analyzing arguments in our sources, as well as when we start to create our own arguments, right, we have to analyze the arguments, existing arguments. However, developing on complexity of the argument, we should be able to distinguish some or all of the following components. 5 important things. First of all, the main claim that the argument is making. So at the time of analyzing arguments, you have to identify the main claim. Secondly, any additional claims. Okay? Then any other claims that are refuted. The reasoning provided to support or refute different claims. And the evidence used to support or refute the reasons. So these 5 things or components we have to think of at the time of analyzing arguments. So the next step consists of asking questions about how and why the author has used particular evidence and reasoning to make the claims. Now, what are the strategies for analyzing arguments? I personally believe that you have ideas about analyzing arguments strategies. Especially, we use 2 types of strategies to analyze arguments. One is deductive, another is inductive. Okay, deductive arguments begin with a general statement or hypothesis, and then examine the possibilities, reasons, and evidence to reach specific conclusion. Okay, example of a simple deductive argument: humans have brains. Okay, and we know Shashi is human, therefore I argue that Shashi has a brain. This is a deductive argument. On the other side, we have some inductive arguments, right? These are opposite to deductive. They start with specific observations and then make broad generalizations from these specific observations. Okay, example, I went to the local grocery store and bought a bucket on each day of the week for 5 weeks. Okay, so the bucket is bought on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays were very fresh. But those bought on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sundays were a bit stale. So this is the whole statement. So I argue that these are most likely baked on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, as they are fresh on that days. Okay, so recognizing whether an argument is deductive or inductive can help determine how authors use reasoning and evidence to support claims, and it will help also to spot the gaps in reasoning and evidences. Okay, so these are 2 important strategies that can help us analyzing arguments in critical thinking. Now, how can we map the arguments? An argument map is a simple tool that allows us to detach ourselves from the source text and create our own outline of an argument. That is argument mapping. Okay, the simplicity and clarity of an argument map can help us get a better sense of how an argument is constructed and how multiple claims are supported by reasoning and evidences. Remember, always we have to have reasoning, we have to have evidences, we have to have fact. Without this, we cannot make our arguments. Then, interrogation of assumptions. How can you do that? An assumption is a claim that is believed to be true without any supporting evidence. So, if you do not have evidence, it is just an assumption. So when analyzing arguments, evidence, and methodologies, we notice them, they often rely on assumptions. So these may be explicit or implicit, I mean, stated or unstated. So we can analyze assumptions to distinguish between explicit claims, right, or implied or assumed claims. However, we must pay attention to the reasoning and consistency in our critical thinking, especially at the time of analysis, right? So how we will do that? So we have to review logical connection between parts of the argument. For example, are the claims supported by relevant reasons or evidences? Do the conclusions logically follow the reasons and evidences presented? Are the claims, reasons, evidences consistent and logically presented? So when analyzing an argument, we have to assess it in context against other possible arguments. And also we have to consider the strength and weakness of the different arguments and perspective to build our own analysis. There are some examples regarding this reasoning and consistency. Does the argument support or align with the other arguments? Does it compare or contrast with other arguments? Are different perspectives taken into account? Who would benefit from this proposal? And is the reasoning balanced? So if we have these questions in our mind, right, we'll be able to make good reasoning and consistency of the arguments. And analyzing methodologies and evidences is also part of analysis of to the steps to develop critical thinking stage. Analyzing the methodology of a source will help us determining the quality of the evidences that methodology can produce. And it will also allow us to better understand the methodologies and spot problems and potential bias. So, analyzing methodologies is particularly relevant if we are required to provide a detailed critique of published articles. Okay, so in each and every research, whether it is an article or a thesis or a monograph or a book, we should have appropriate methodologies. So in case of critical thinking, well, we will be analyzing our other arguments, our other researches. We have to think critically. We have to analyze critically the methodology used in those papers or researches. However, analyzing methodology involves closely examination of the design of the research, methods used to collect data, and approach taken to data interpretation. So in this stage, some questions may help us to get started. What are the questions? How has the research been designed? Look at the research design. How might this methodology favor certain types of data, social groups, or conclusions? Are the data gathering interpretation process described? What data collection instruments have been used? Has the participant selection been described? What is considered an outlier or erroneous data and why? Are ethical considerations clearly explained? And how have the author's assumptions influenced the methodology? So we have to have these questions in our mind at the time of analyzing the methodologies and evidences of, analyzing arguments in critical thinking skills. Okay. However, when we analyze evidences, we question the credibility and reliability of the findings or results and the information used to support the reasons that make up arguments. Okay. Here, at the time of analyzing evidences, we have to have some questions in our mind again, like the methodologies. How is this evidence shaped by the context in which it was created? Is the evidence from most of the credible, reliable sources available? How does the evidence support the claims and reasons being made? Okay, how suitable are the tools, methods, or concepts used to interpret these evidences? Okay, so if we have these questions in our mind, we'll be able to analyze the evidences effectively. Now, this is the fifth stage of developing critical thinking skills, that is evaluation or evaluating the arguments of others. Okay, we said earlier that we have to have arguments of others as well, right? So that we can have good arguments. So based on our as well as others' argument, we have to reach in a conclusion or creation. However, so evaluation of other arguments, it is the fifth stage into the steps to develop critical thinking skills. When we evaluate sources and arguments, we basically judge their quality, right? Value and significance. We consider their strengths and limitations that respect to the examination we are undertaking or to a particular context. So an evaluation in critical thinking requires asking some questions. There are some questions, as many as 6 questions. What are the strengths and limitations of the source or the argument? How well are the claims supported by the reasons and evidence? What claims need further investigation? How does the quality of one source or argument compare with others that address a similar topic? And what contribution to knowledge does it make? And overall assessment of the source of argument. So if you have these questions in your mind again, at the time of critical thinking, you will be able to have good evaluation of others' argument. However, it is supported by analysis, right? Because analysis is the earliest step to evaluation. And analysis, we know, allows to break our sources into their different components. Okay. Now the question is, the ability to evaluate is a critical thinking skill, we know. So how to evaluate sources, arguments, evidences, and methodologies? In our earlier steps, we tried to understand how to analyze the sources, arguments, evidences, and methodologies. Now, after analysis, we are to evaluate. How to do that? First of all, if we talk about sources, when evaluate sources, we need to consider the need of our project as well as the conventions of our discipline. So, while we use alternate evaluate the questions, some sources will require more specific evaluation criteria. So if we are writing a book review, an article review, or a critical analysis, what we need to do? We need to analyze the source, explore the sections below on evaluating arguments, evidences, and methodologies. And then we have to learn how to develop our own argument. But if we are writing a literature review, what do we have to do? We have to analyze the sources, explore the sections below, evaluating arguments, again, evidences and methodologies, and learn how to develop our own arguments. Now, regarding arguments, one effective approach to evaluating arguments is to begin by asking some questions. Again, there are the list of questions regarding evaluation of arguments. So remember, evaluation of arguments is different than that of analysis of arguments. What questions we have to be in our mind regarding evaluation of our arguments? First of all, how well does the argument address the problem? Does the argument have a clear conclusion? Does the conclusion logically follow the reasoning and claims made in the argument? Are there any implicit claim supported by evidences or not? What is the quality and relevance of the evidences? How well it is the evidence is used? And can we identify any bias or flawed reasoning? So if we have again these questions, right, and we have answers, we can start formulating our evaluation. Okay? So the example below show what an evaluation of a simple argument could be like. The example builds on an earlier analysis and provides an evaluation of the argument's evidence, as well as reasoning and claim, as well as argument as a whole. However, we said earlier there are some questions, right? And we should have some answers of those questions so that we can have a good evaluation of arguments. But this is a step-by-step process. There are 6 steps. First of all, in case of evaluating some arguments, we have to assess the main argument first. Secondly, investigate implicit claim or reasoning. Then thirdly, we have to assess the evidence. Then appraise the reasoning. And then consider the limitation. And finally, we have to formulate the evaluation. You can understand all these things very easily. So these are the 6 steps to evaluate arguments. Now, how can we evaluate methodology and evidences? Again, there are a lot of questions. A general rule when evaluating methodologies and evidence is the reliable methodologies when applied well result in reliable evidence. Okay, so when we use methodologies or evidence from other sources, always question them to ensure they are credible, relevant, and accurate for our purpose. Okay, so the criteria for deciding what is strong or weak methodology or even evidence vary by discipline. When evaluating them, we should therefore keep in mind both the assessment guideline and the standard and expectations of our own discipline, whether we are in social science or even business or in humanities. However, again, there are some questions that can help us to determine the strengths and limitations of the methodologies and evidences at the time of evaluating those. First of all, what is strength and limitation of the methodology? Right? Is the methodology most relevant, precise, accurate for the task? Is it reliable? Is it a standard used in the discipline? Is it reproducible? How does the choice of methodology impact the generalizability of the arguments it supports? How well was the methodology applied? How accurate and precise was the generation of collecting and processing of data and evidences? And what are the main strengths and limitations of the evidences? Are there any gap, inaccuracies, inconsistencies, or errors in data or evidences? How might these evidence affect the arguments if viewed from a different perspective? So all these questions, again, are in front of you at the time of evaluating your methodologies and evidences. Okay, so if you have the answers, you can evaluate methodologies and evidences of other people very effectively. Otherwise, you will be lost. Now, we have some sort of errors in argumentation, that is bias and poor reasoning, right? So when we engage with arguments, we sometimes take shortcuts that can undermine our critical thinking. So never go shortcut. Okay, one shortcut to be cautious of is using the same reasoning for arguments that look similar. However, if an argument looks very much like another one we have just evaluated, it is tempting to save time by using the same approach again. Okay, so another potential misleading shortcut is relying on intuition or feeling. If we agree with something, we probably feel it is good argument. Okay, likewise, if we disagree, we probably feel the argument is flawed or incorrect. So shortcuts in thinking and feeling can speed up our analysis, evaluation, but also undermine our own critical thinking. So we can miss errors in reasoning, weak evidence, or unsubstantiated assumptions. So such shortcuts can easily turn into bias and poor reasoning. Okay, so both biases and poor reasoning are errors in critical thinking and argumentation. Okay, so it is very important that at the time of critical thinking, I mean analysis or evaluation, we have to identify all the biases and poor reasoning. We should avoid this. Otherwise, it will kill our own, creation of knowledge or creation of own arguments. Now, what is bias and how to evaluate it? Right? There are some definitions of bias. Yes, they are perceptions and judgments made by human mind and can often be the basis for errors in our reasoning. So that can be based on self-judgment are made. Okay, so recognizing bias will help us to evaluate the motives of the person who created the argument. And you see, in many instances, they may not be aware of these biases. However, if they have a specific agenda, they may be deliberately constructing their own argument from biased positions. So once we are aware of any bias in our argument, we are more likely to identify arguments, claims, and evidences that have been mispresented or ignored. Okay, so you have to be very careful about the biases at the time of evaluating our arguments or others' argument. Now, there are some examples of bias. You know about that. I'm just giving some examples like confirmation bias. This is a tendency to look for information, evidence, and opinions that confirm pre-existing belief. Okay, regarding confirmation bias, while based on good evidence, is the claim based on all sides of the argument? Is the argument or counter argument that might refute an argument? You can ask these questions to understand the confirmation bias. There is some consensus bias. This is the tendency to believe what other people think or do what they do just because other people are thinking or doing it. So sometimes it is called bandwagon bias or fallacy. Okay? When evaluating an argument, we have to ask, is the argument relying on consensus? Does the argument provide reasons for consensus? Or is it suggesting our own view that is not valid? So if we can ask these questions, we can understand consensus bias if we have the answer. There is another type of bias that is called sunk cost bias. This is the tendency to believe a cost of time, money, or energy that will go to waste if a new course of action is taken. So when evaluating this sort of bias, right, we have to ask some questions like, does the argument justify future actions based on resources used in the past actions and ignore the fact that continuing the same way? Does the argument object to a course of action, claiming that changing the course of action is wasted time, money, or energy? Okay. Now, these are the different types of bias. And if we have these questions in our mind, and if we have the answers, we can evaluate, or you can understand these biases, and you can evaluate the argument based on these things. Okay. Then what is the poor reasoning and how to evaluate it? We said earlier that if we have some bias, it will lead to some poor reasoning. Okay. Arguments, claims, reasons, and evidences are held together by logic, right? So without logic, there cannot be any argument, claim, or reasons or evidence. So the evaluation of an argument's logical structure ensures that is not based on flawed patterns of reasoning. Okay? So flawed patterns of reasoning, commonly known as logical fallacies, that indicate a weak or invalid argument. Okay, so understanding common logical fallacies can help to identify weak arguments as well as improve our own argumentation skill. Okay. However, there are some examples of fallacies. First of all, attacking the person, right? It is sometimes referred to as the ad hominem fallacy. This is a reasoning flaw because it relies on insulting or discrediting the person making the argument rather than on providing reasons or objections against an argument being made. Okay, so when evaluating an argument of these sort of things, we can ask ourselves like, are the evidence, reasons, or objects used to oppose the original argument based only on an argument or judgment of personal characteristics, or opposing the original one by providing relevant evidence and reasoning, or is it attacking the author without engaging within the argument or reasoning or evidence? So if we have this sort of questions and can get the answer, it is helping us to identify or evaluate the poor reasoning and to evaluate this. However, there are some other questions as well, creating fear of chain of reactions of events and suggesting there are only one, two options. Okay. Now, oversimplifying or misinterpreting, of arguments. Okay, this is often called straw man fallacy, because when an argument is oversimplified or misrepresented, it becomes something that cannot stand up to scrutiny and is easily pulled apart or dismissed. So if misrepresents someone else's argument is in a reductive way to make it seem to the argument is not credible. Okay, so this can involve exaggerating an opponent's position, focusing only on the weakest line of reasoning, or refuting something not even stated. However, when evaluating an argument, we have to ask ourselves, is the value of someone else's argument being underestimated or ignored? Are the limitations of someone else's argument being exaggerated? Does the argument only focus on the limitations of someone else's argument? Or does the argument refute something that has been even stated in the other argument? So again, if we have these questions in our mind, it is possible to evaluate an argument effectively, right? Now, we are in the last stage of developing critical thinking skill. Dear participants, are you all okay with me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I know this is very boring lecture, I think.
No,
This is
no, no,
one-way
sir.
traffic.
No, sir. We are enjoying, sir.
No,
Okay,
it's
thank you
a
very much.
very informative session.
Okay, thank you. So we are at the last stage of developing critical thinking skills and mindset, that is creating own arguments. So up to the fifth stage, we clarified, we questioned, we identified the arguments, we analyzed the arguments, and then evaluated. So all are done. Now this is our turn as a researcher. We have to create our own argument. That's we call also synthesis. However, creating arguments consist of bringing together all the evidences, reasoning, claims, and developing our own main claim. Okay, so it is one of the most challenging and also very exciting one aspects of critical thinking. Okay, so we have to be very careful in this stage of creating our own argument. Creating arguments relies on the synthesis, that means placing things together. And this is because arguments need to bring together the insights from our analysis and evaluation of other sources, as well as our own thinking and ideas. So these are connected to other steps of critical thinking. Synthesis, we know, it is very creative act that challenges and improves our critical thinking. So we need to know how to synthesize, how to create, right? This is basically helping us to create new knowledge. And we know that we have to create knowledge. Otherwise, it is not possible to teach others. So it requires to consider what others have argued about our topic, and to include not only the evidence and claims that support our argument, but also opposing and different views. That is very important point in creating own arguments or in synthesis. Okay? Now, what is actually making a good argument, or what makes a good argument? If you talk about a good argument or a synthesis, people are saying that there should be 6 important features. Now the question is, what are those important features of a good synthesis or a good argument that you are going to create? First of all, it should have a clear statement of the main claim or argument, right? Secondly, it should have a logical structure that connects the main claim with other claims and counterclaims made in our argument. Look, main claims with other claims and counterclaims. A lot of things are there, and it should be, all these should be connected in a logical structure, and that will be a good argument. Thirdly, evidences that support the claims made in our own claim or argument. Fourthly, clear reasoning that links evidences and claims, including counterclaims made in our argument. Then reasoning that shows we have analyzed and evaluated our own sources. And finally, clear writing that demonstrates to our readers that our argument is well researched, logical, balanced, and convincing. So we have to remember all these 6 characteristics of a good argument. So whenever you make or try to make or going to make a good argument, right, you have to have focus on all these characteristic features. Otherwise, your argument will not be a good one. Okay. Now the question is, how can you develop an argument or good argument? However, there are some steps. Okay. If you follow these steps, that will help you to build your good argument. First of all, formulate main claim. We said here the basic feature of good argument. So firstly, we have to formulate our own claim. We can start by drafting a claim or a hypothesis or even a position on an issue. This may be based on instructions in an assessment task, on the findings in an experiment, or our own analysis of claims made by the authors in our sources. So this is the first thing in making a good argument. Secondly, bring together reasons and evidences. These are second steps to make arguments, your own arguments. We should consider the reasons and evidences that support our main claim as well as those against it. So to do this, we need to develop a synthesis of how our main claims fits in with other perspectives, claims, reasons, and evidences. So these are second steps to create good arguments. Thirdly, structuring the arguments. We said that structure, logical structure, is also very important characteristic feature of a good argument. So we have to establish key themes and supporting claims around that our claims, revolves. Then determine each line of reasoning and structure. And this process can resemble putting together a jigsaw puzzle, as we'll need to piece together evidences, reasons, and claims to create a logical and coherent argument. So this is the third stage of creating good argument. And finally, we have to test, refine the main claim. The first is making a claim and then testing it. So after we have structured and drafted our argument, it is very important that we make sure it addresses. Then take a step back and consider how our thinking might apply to a broader context. So these are the 4 steps to have a good argument, to develop a good argument. Now, how can we formulate main claim? We said here, formulate our main claim. Again, the question is, how can we make this? Okay, claim should be concise, to the point, and capable of being either supported or rejected. Okay, they should be expressed as statements or propositions. Okay, one way to formulate a claim is to begin with a question and then refine. So we have to know, in order to formulate a claim, we need to make a decision first. It is okay to be unsure of our claim when we first formulate it, or to change our mind when we bring together our reasons and evidences. So refining and improving is part of the process of developing an argument. Okay, then bring together evidences, reasoning. So evidence, we know that, provides the foundation of our own argument. So without credible, relevant, and accurate evidence, our argument loses substances and becomes a statement of opinion. So to ensure our evidence is appropriate, always question our sources, because we know that reasoning is the glue that holds our argument together. Reasons connect evidences with claims and show our readers how we are using evidences to make our own point. Remember, without good reasoning, even strong evidences may not be enough to make a strong argument. So with your evidence, you have to have reasoning, then it will be a good argument. Okay, so when using evidence to support your reasons and claims, we have to do something. First of all, ensure the evidence we choose is relevant. We have to ensure that evidence is appropriate and always questions our sources. We have to carefully read the assessment guidelines, the doubt, seek guidance from our tutors, consult the library subjects, guides that provide advices about how to find quality scholarly sources. Then it will be good, reasoning and evidences. Now, the question arise again, what kind of evidence can we use? Right? Evidence means sources, data, right? You know about all these sort of evidences that we use in social science or even business law or humanities research. We have experimental data, we can use this. We have reports, research studies from government, universities or NGOs, statistics, government statistics, expert opinions, systemic review and meta-analysis, journal articles, specialized analysis methods, news articles. Okay, so all these information or sources we can use uh, as evidences, okay, in our argument. Yes, also artifact, historical events, case studies, laws, structural argument. Okay, so these are all what is called evidences that can we use in our arguments. Now the question is, how can we structure those arguments? This is another very important thing. We said earlier about structuring the argument. To make sure our argument is logical and well organized, we can create a map of our own argument. That is called mapping arguments. Okay, so an argument map is a visual representation of argument. It is especially useful when creating complex arguments or when developing an argument based on a review of literature. Okay, supporting each other. So an argument map can make it easier to manage information from a variety of sources and to identify key claims based on the different reasons, because it can help us strengthening, focusing our own themes and logical relationship between the claims. Okay, so in structuring the argument, we're talking about argument map. Now again, the question is, how can we create argument map? Say the question. So we can build an argument map using specialized argument or mind mapping software. There's some mind mapping software which is available. So we can only use sticky notes or hand draw arguments, right? So what we'll do here, refining the argument. That's the final stage. Once we've structured our argument, written a draft, reflecting on whether we have adequately addressed the issues or the problems we are initiating faced with, then we have to consider the new challenges that may have arisen from our own critical thinking process. Then take a step back. Okay. So there are some also strategies for refining the arguments. These are the last steps to creating your own argument. So in refining the arguments, in a clear logical way, does the claim logically connect to each other? Or are there any unsupported or contradicting claims that confuse the reader? And explicitly connect argument to the broader context. And the final step in refining argument is connecting it to a broader response to the specific question, but also consider how the argument applies more generally and how it fits into big picture. Okay, so you have to have this question in your mind and you have to get the answers so that you can refine your argument. However, a useful way to connect arguments to a broader context, as we said earlier, again, we have to create some questions in our mind. How how does my argument address important issues? What implications can my argument have for other related questions? And what aspect of my argument could be useful in addressing other questions or problems? So if you have answers of these questions, it will help us to connect my argument with the broader context. Okay? So these are the strategies to refine arguments. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, actually I am at the end of my presentation. However, I will take 5-10 minutes more. Is it all right
No,
for you?
no, no problem, sir. No problem. Please continue, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Okay, so by this time we can understand how can we create our own argument, right? How can we think critically? Mainly we focused on 6 important steps to create our own thinking, our own argument. That is basically critical thinking. Now, in critical thinking, there's some common pitfalls, common problems, right? That arise when we think critically or analytically. Some of those are misunderstanding. This is very common pitfalls. What is that? This can arise due to language or cultural differences, a lack of awareness of the process involved, or misunderstanding that critical thinking means making negative comments. No, critical thinking doesn't mean negative comments, right? It is thinking critically whether it is good for us or not good for us, something like this. It is not negative ones. So language, cultural differences sometimes mislead us, right, in critical thinking. So misunderstanding is one of the most important common pitfalls. Secondly, reluctance to critique. This is a norm, right? Or the norm or experts in a field and consider alternative views. Filling out our own comfort zone or fearful of being wrong. That's why we never try to critique. So we have to be critical, not in a negative sense, but in a positive way. Okay? So reluctance again to be critical is also another pitfalls in critical thinking. Thirdly, lack of detailed knowledge. Yes. We know that superficial knowledge, not having read deeply enough around the subject, is also one of the problem or pitfalls in thinking critically. If you do not have enough knowledge, it is not possible for you to think critically, right? Then wanting to know the answers without having to ask questions. This is another important pitfall in critical thinking. At a personal level, barriers to critical thinking can arise through an over-reliance on feelings or emotions, right? Self-centered or societal, okay, such as cultural-centered thinking like conformism, dogma, or peer pressure. Unconscious bias or selective perception, okay, and inability to be receptive to an idea or point of view that differs from our own, that is called close-mindedness. Unwarranted assumptions or lack of relevant information, and fear of being wrong, poor communication skills or apathy, lack of personal honesty. These are all personal level barriers to critical thinking, right? So while we will be thinking critically on a particular topic, we have to avoid all these personal barriers. Otherwise, it is not possible for us to be a good critical thinker. Okay? However, why it is important to become aware of these potential pitfalls? As a critical thinker or a reflective thinker, we need to be aware of all these barriers. There are some of the barriers. I've just listed some of those. So we have to acknowledge the challenges, right? And overcome these as best we can. And this starts with an understanding of expectations. You see, some researchers feel anxious about questioning the work of experts. Okay, so critical thinking does not mean that we are challenging someone's work. It's very important. We are not challenging someone or telling them that they are wrong. But critical thinking is basically encouraging a deeper understanding a consideration of alternative views, an engagement in thought, discourses, or research that informs our independent judgment. This is very important point in critical thinking. Okay? And we know that it is encouraging to be constructive by considering the strength and weakness of a claim and differing sides of an argument. However, we know that critical thinking helps us clarifying the points, encourages deeper thought, allows us to determine whether information that we come across in an accurate and reliable. So this helps us to form our own judgment and drives our research forward. However, people can find it difficult to think critically, irrespective of their education or intellectual ability. Because the key to understanding critical thinking is not only knowing and making sure that we are understanding the process, but also being able to put this into practice by applying our own knowledge. And that's why it is said that critical and reflective thinking are very complex and lifelong skill that we continue to develop as a part of our own personal and professional growth. However, in our everyday life, we may also come across those who do not exercise critical thinking, and these might impact on our decisions that affect us. Okay, so it is very important to recognize this and to use critical and reflective thinking to ensure that our own view is informed by reasoned judgment and supported by evidence. So we should be aware of all these potentials, pitfalls in critical thinking. Now, I'm at the end of my presentation. Just have a concluding remarks. We know that it is essential component of any research that enables the researchers to evaluate information, identify bias, and draw valid conclusions. It involves defining research problems that we discussed earlier, conducting literature review, evaluating evidence and sources, analyzing and synthesizing information, evaluating arguments, reasoning, applying critical thinking in research design and methodology, communicating effectively, embracing creativity and open-mindedness, practicing self-reflection, seeking feedback, engaging in peer review. So critical thinking is each and every year of a research from starting to ending. Okay, so again, we have to be a good critical thinker. However, by cultivating and applying critical thinking skills in research, we can enhance the ability, quality, and rigor of our work and contribute to the advancement of knowledge in our particular field. Wherever you are, in social science or humanities or in business or in law or in science or even humanities, we can contribute to the advancement of knowledge by critical thinking. Remember to continuously practice and refine your critical thinking skills, as they are valuable not only in research but also in various aspects of our personal life. Thank you very much. And these are the references that I have used to prepare this particular discussion today. Thank you. And if you have any questions, we may have a question answer session. Thank you very much for listening to me.
So
For a long time.
thank you so much, sir. And it's a very broad discussion, and it's a very brief topic, and sir has elaborated every aspects and every point, and we all have enjoyed this lecture. So now I would like to invite to Sakshi ji for concluding remark, and after this we will be open the session for the question answer. Someone has
Okay.
sent the question in
Thank you,
message.
sir. And from your lectures,
Yes, if time allows, we may have question answer session. Otherwise, I will share this particular presentation to all of you by email.
Okay,
And if you
sir.
have any question directly, you can email me. I'll be able to answer, and we may have some conversation
Okay, okay,
now.
sir. Okay, sir. So only we will be take the only
Okay.
two questions, sir. Two questions, sir. We
Yeah,
will.
please go on.
So,
Shaksi.
okay, sir. Okay, sir. So, sir, one questions has sent by the Sneha Yadav. She is a research scholar, Central University of Amarkantak. Uh, she is asking that she is doing PhD on the administrative economic development, and
Okay.
she has taken the special scheme of the Indian government that's regarded as the Manrega. So he has doubt that he has questions that how can I decide the parameters of the economic administrative development.
Administrative development.
Yes, sir. With to relate the economic development.
Okay. I mean, administration towards economic development.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, again, I discuss about these things in the earlier stage. Especially, we have to have literature review, the sources that I told, right? Sources means all the existing literature, updated literature regarding your particular topic, right? If you go through all this literature, especially updated one, you can get some evidences, right? You can get some arguments, and we discuss about how to analyze the arguments, right? So if you have gone through all the existing literature related to your topic, you will find some arguments, and based on those arguments, you will be able to set your parameters related to your topic, right? So first of all, you need to understand your objectives, your title, your area of study. So if you understand your purpose, your aim, your objective of your study, then you will go to find your literature, relevant literature. I talked about relevant literature because we have huge information regarding, for example, economic development. So do we need all the information related to economic development? No, because we are researching in a particular area of economic development, right? So we have to find relevant literature regarding the particular topic and find some variables that will help us to make our own parameters or variables or arguments regarding the particular question or topic, right?
Okay, thank you, sir. So one so Jyoti Singh has raised the hand. So yes, Jyoti Singh ji, you can ask the question. Please unmute yourself and you can ask the question, briefly question only. Yes, Jyoti Singh ji, can you listen me?
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Jyoti Singh ji, can you listen me? If anybody want to ask the question, so session is open. You can ask directly.
Okay, Jyoti Singh does not have any question. Okay.
Okay. So anyone?
Okay, I'm open to each and everybody. I'm very happy that I have connected with so many scholars from Indian context. So I will be available online, right? I will give my email ID to all of you. I will supply these materials to Vikas so that Vikas can share with you. So if you have an related question regarding any sort of, methodological issues, research methodology, just ask me, email me. I will try to give you some feedback.
So,
Okay?
sir, one query have our
Yeah.
moderator, sir. Our moderator,
Yes,
Sakshi
please.
Singh is asking something. So, yes, Sakshi.
Yes, Sakshi Singh. Go on.
Thank you, sir. Actually, I don't have a query. Just after listening your lecture, uh, as I conclude that, as we all know, and as we all said that the literature review is a weapon of every step of research. So I conclude that after lecture, likewise, that literature review as a weapon, critical thinking is the fuel of that weapon and basis of every steps of research, which helps to produce some novel and unique work.
Yes. That's true, Sakshi.
And
Thank you very much for the good
thank you,
conclusion.
sir.
So,
Okay.
Sakshi ji, Dhiresh ji को invite करिए.
Any
Please
other
invite
comment?
Dhiresh for vote of thanks.
Okay.
जी.
Dhiresh ji is here. Dhiresh ji. धीरेश जी, धीरेश,
Hello.
हाँ धीरेश जी, हाँ प्लीज गिव द vote of thanks. Sir, Dhiresh ji is a research scholar of Jawaharlal Nehru University, JNU. So he will be delivered the vote of thanks, sir.
That's great.
Good evening to all of you. First of all, we have to the for accepting our invitation and knowledgeful lecture. This full session by Vikas sir, and we all thankful to Vikas sir for organizing this wonderful session. And I am also thankful for Naina Prasad and co-convenor Sakshi Singh. Uh, Thanks a lot, sir, for joining us at this informative and knowledgeable session. And from India also, sir.
Okay.